I should have walked back out the moment her eyes touched my dress. Cold blue, the kind that scans and judges, the kind that tastes something sour and decides it's you. I stood beneath crystal chandeliers that felt taller than any ceiling from my life. A navy hem I'd saved $300 for brushing my knees, the air heavy with white roses and piano notes that pretended to be kindness. 200 guests shimmered like a constellation, and I told myself this was joy. This was my son's day. This was what love looked like when you could afford it. I didn't know I was already standing on a stage I hadn't agreed to climb. By 6 p.m., I had memorized the shape of the Riverside Country Club's bar faucets because strangers kept looking through me instead of at me. The bartender filled a glass of white wine, and I nodded as if that made me belong. My hair set in a salon wave I'd spent $45 I did not have. A tiny rebellion against the years that had taught me to be practical. When Elodie's mother drifted past with her sister, their perfume trailing like a ribbon, I heard the words that slid through me cleaner than any blade. I can't believe they invited the help. Look at that woman in the cheap blue dress. She should be serving drinks, not drinking them. I stared harder at the faucet, at my reflection bending and breaking in the chrome, and whispered to myself, "Not you. Not you. Not tonight." As if saying it could change the world. The seating chart stood on a golden easel like scripture. I searched for my name and found it hiding at table 18, tucked behind a pillar, far from the head table where my son's tuxedo gleamed beside Elodie's floating white. I smiled at distant relatives who weren't mine and college friends who would never become my friends, nodding through weather and real estate and vacations that cost more than my year. I told myself mothers belong no matter where they're seated. I told myself to be small and grateful and good. Dinner emptied into speeches, napkins folded with the precision of people who have never chased a bill. And Elodie stood with her hand on the round of her belly, a picture frame of grace. "I want to thank everyone who made today perfect," she said, voice as clear as glass. She thanked her parents with a glow that made the room lean forward, thanked Brent's colleagues, thanked vendors whose names sounded like brands rather than people. Then her eyes found me. Something shuddered. A smile that never touched her cheeks, and especially the service staff. She continued, the caterers, the florists, and even her hand drifted, light as a moth. The woman in the blue dress who I assume is here to help clean up later. The silence lasted a heartbeat. Then Patricia's laugh cracked it open like ice, and the room followed, quick and breathless, as if cruelty had been waiting to exhale. I set my wine glass down because my hand wouldn't stop trembling. Brent's face flickered confusion, then stilled when Elodie moved on, thanking the real planner, moving the spotlight away from the sting she'd left in my skin. I could feel every look pity like damp cloth, amusement like a match head. I stared at the tablecloth until the threads blurred. When you work 3 jobs, you learn the discipline of stillness, the art of swallowing whole storms. But there are humiliations that do not pass. They anchor themselves where breath should be. What hurt was not the laughter. Laughter is old to women like me. What hurt was the quiet of my son. The boy who once pressed his forehead to the window at 10 p.m. to wait for my car lights did not stand, did not raise a hand, did not clear his throat and say, "That's my mother." He blinked and let the moment go, like a leaf on a river he chose not to swim against. A part of me broke and sank, and another part, a harder, older part, rose up in its place. I could have left. I could have slipped through the service doors and let their voices fade, driven home and washed the navy dress in water cold enough to dull the memory. But there are truths that live in shoeboxes for decades, truths with hospital stamps and signatures and probabilities written in black ink, truths that shift the weight of a name. I lifted my purse from my lap and felt the edge of an envelope I had not planned to use tonight. My pulse steadied. I did not stand yet. I just watched the room that had laughed at me, and I thought, not you, not me, not like this. I waited until 9:30 p.m., long after the toasts had thinned and the band slid into the kind of songs that make people forget themselves. Then I slipped out beneath chandeliers that winked like they knew a secret. The cool air outside was a mercy. In the car. I kept both hands on the wheel the way you do when the only thing holding you together is the shape of your grip. The country club lights receded in the mirror, a jeweled crown growing smaller, and the road rose up in clean black lines that asked nothing from me. I drove in silence, the wipers moving once across a sky that wasn't raining, a nervous tic the car inherited from me. By 10:15 p.m., I was home, navy dress still zipped, heels carried like I couldn't trust the ground. On my couch, I sat upright like a student waiting to be called on, the envelope against my thigh warm from the heat of humiliation. To steady myself, I did what I'd always done. I measured the distance between then and now. Then, when Brent was 6 months old and his father was a ghost with a perfect haircut, the night smelled like milk and metal shelves. I stocked canned soup until 2 a.m., came home to a neighbor's soft snores on my couch and a baby whose breathing was the only music I could afford. When he was 5, he fell asleep in kindergarten because he waited for the 11 p.m. sound of my key. I lied to his teacher and said he had a cold, then worked a double shift to pay for new shoes and felt like a thief when I handed him the box. There is a ledger in every mother's chest, and the arithmetic is done in hours instead of dollars. But before the long math of those years, there was the beginning that wrote itself like a warning I refused to read. I was 18 when I first served table 12 at Romano's, an upscale Italian place where the linen hissed when you unfolded it. He arrived every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m., a man who wore success like it was tailored to his bones, grilled salmon, side salad, white wine, he would say, and I would nod like I was fluent in a language I had only just learned. His name was Marcus Wellington, and the city seemed to bend around it. He asked about my mother's health after seeing me read insurance pamphlets on break, and I mistook attention for kindness. Kindness for rescue. When he said, "Have coffee with me after your shift," I believed I'd been selected by fate, not convenience. 3 months. That's all it was. 3 months measured in hotel room curtains and the hush of expensive carpets. 3 months of stories about a loveless marriage and a plan that always started next week. When I told him I was late, his eyes didn't harden. They emptied. "This can't happen," he said, pacing like a man hearing his own eulogy. He offered an abortion. I said no. He offered money to disappear. I said no. He said, "You knew what this was." And I did not recognize my own voice when I replied. It was my life. By the next Tuesday, he stopped being a regular and became a rumor. By the next month. Romano's let me go with a smile that smelled like cologne and a warning I pretended not to hear. I decided in a hospital room at 3 a.m., under lights that make everyone look honest, that my son would not be a scandal. I wrote a kinder story. Your father loved us but couldn't stay. I folded the harsher truth into a shoebox with hospital bracelets and a photograph of a newborn with green eyes too old for his face. I told myself the lie was a shelter. For years, I kept it standing. What changed wasn't status or age. It was seeing Brent reach for a world that kept moving the fence back. He climbed anyway. And I heard the scrape of his palms in every quiet phone call. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator with money I should have spent on the dentist. I took a water glass Brent left in my sink and a coffee cup Marcus discarded after a charity luncheon, where I stood in the crowd like a past he'd already survived. The lab report came back 2 weeks before the wedding. The numbers cold and merciful, 99.9%. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time in 29 years. At 11:40 p.m., I rose, dress still on, and carried the shoebox to the kitchen table like a small coffin finally ready to be opened. I spread the documents, hospital records, the investigator's notes, the DNA report like cards in a game I no longer wished to play. My phone lay beside them, black and patient. I scrolled to the number the investigator had given me for his office, my thumb hovering as if heat alone could make the call. Not revenge, I said into the empty room. Truth. The word felt clean in my mouth. I pressed the button, listened to the first ring, and closed my eyes as if prayer were the same as breathing. The third ring stopped mid-note, replaced by a voice I hadn't heard in almost 3 decades. Wellington Development Corporation. Mr. Wellington's office, the assistant said, crisp and professional. My throat went dry. Tell him Darla Cooper is calling from Romano's restaurant. He'll know what it's about. The silence that followed stretched, sharp and delicate. Please hold, she finally replied. The waiting music felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. Then came his voice, older, deeper, but unmistakably his Darla. Just my name spoken like a secret dragged into daylight. I could hear the air leave my lungs before I answered. Hello? Marcus? For a moment, neither of us said anything. 29 years of lies sat between us, breathing. What do you want? He asked. I want to meet, I said quietly. There's something you need to know. His sigh came heavy through the line. If this is about money, it's about your son. There was a pause so complete I could hear the faint hum of his office lights. I don't have a son. You do, I said. His name is Brent Cooper. He's 28, 6 feet tall, has your green eyes, and he just got married yesterday to a woman who's 6 months pregnant with your grandchild. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, the sound of a man walking carefully across a frozen lake. You told me you took care of it. I told you I would handle it. I never said how. He exhaled sharply. What do you want? Darla money, a payoff to disappear again. The old insult burned, but my voice stayed calm. I don't want your money. I want you to meet your son. He deserves to know where he comes from. That's impossible, he muttered. My wife Victoria, she doesn't know about us. My children don't know. Your reputation, I said. The bitterness slipping through. Marcus, I raised your son alone. 3 jobs, no support, no help. I never called you, never asked for anything. But after last night, after the way they laughed at me, I think it's time you face what you left behind. He didn't answer right away. I imagined him standing by those tall office windows, staring at the skyline that bore his name on half its buildings. You have proof, he asked, finally. A DNA test. 99.9% probability. I let the silence fill with consequence. He cleared his throat. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I made one 29 years ago when I believed you cared. I won't repeat it. The quiet stretched so long I thought he might hang up. Then, where do you want to meet? I pictured the park by the lake, the pavilion where I'd once taken Brent to feed ducks when we still believed pennies and wishes were the same thing. Riverside Park. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., bring a photo of yourself at 28. He looks just like that. After hanging up, I didn't move for a long time. The apartment hummed with the refrigerator's soft breath, the ticking wall clock marking each second closer to a reckoning. My hands were steady now. I wasn't doing this to wound. I was doing this to mend something that had been cracked since the day I gave birth to a child who deserved more than silence. When dawn came, pale and gray through my kitchen window, I made coffee with shaking hands and watched the steam curl like ghosts above the mug. The humiliation from the wedding had turned into something else overnight purpose. I no longer felt small. I felt precise. At 10 a.m., I called Brent. He sounded tired, distracted, the kind of voice that lives halfway inside someone else's life. "Hi, Mom. Listen, Elodie's not feeling great. And we're trying to settle in after yesterday. I just wanted to say the wedding was beautiful." I interrupted, choosing my words carefully. "I was hoping we could have lunch tomorrow, just the two of us. There's something important I need to tell you." He hesitated. "Tomorrow's not great. We're looking at apartments. Maybe next week, Brent," I said softly. "This can't wait. It's about your father." Silence. Pure and heavy. "What about him? I need to tell you some things I should have told you years ago. Please, son. Just an hour." He exhaled into the phone. "Fine. Lunch tomorrow, 1 hour, 12 p.m. "Yes," I whispered. "Thank you." When I hung up, I folded the DNA results back into the envelope. Tomorrow, I would give my son the truth about the man who'd abandoned us, the truth about the power that had always run quietly in his veins. And maybe, after so many years of pretending, I would finally stop being afraid of the name Marcus Wellington. I arrived early at the cafe, the one with chipped blue mugs and creaky floors where I used to take Brent for pancakes on his birthdays, when all I could afford was the kids' menu and a smile. The place smelled the same coffee, syrup, and the faint nostalgia of mornings that belonged only to us. I chose a booth by the window and ordered 2 coffees. Black for him, sweet for me, though I already knew mine would go cold before I touched it. When Brent walked in at 12:15 p.m., he looked every inch the man I'd raised him to become. Pressed shirt, clean lines, confidence borrowed from his new world, but the warmth in his eyes had been replaced with something else. Distance, maybe, or suspicion. He slid into the booth, phone in hand. "I can only stay an hour." "Mom, what's this about?" I wanted to start gently, to ease him toward it. Instead, the words came out like confession. "Your father isn't who you think he is." He frowned, setting the phone down. "What do you mean? His name was never the man I told you about. His name is Marcus Wellington." The name hit the air like thunder without rain. Brent blinked, searching my face for a punchline that didn't come. "Wellington, as in Wellington Development. The man who owns half the city." I nodded. I confirmed it with a DNA test, 99.9% match. He sat back, eyes narrowing. "You've known this my whole life," I suspected. I admitted. "I wanted to protect you from him, from the pain of being unwanted. Protect me." His laugh was sharp, wounded. "Do you know how many times I felt like I didn't belong? Like I came from nothing while everyone else had a story that mattered. You let me grow up believing I was a mistake." "Mom." My throat tightened. "You were never a mistake. You were the reason I survived." But he wasn't listening. Anger had taken the seat across from me, and it was louder than love. "I can't deal with this right now," he said, pushing back from the booth. "Elodie's pregnant. We're trying to build a life. And you drop this now. Why? Because of what happened at the wedding." The word wedding cut deep. "Brent, I didn't tell you out of revenge. I told you because you deserve to know who you are." "No, Mom," he said, voice rising. "You told me because you couldn't stand being humiliated. You wanted to hurt them, and now you're hurting me." He stood before I could stop him, his untouched coffee still steaming between us. "I need time," he said. "Please don't contact me until I've had some." The door chimed behind him, and he was gone, just like that. I sat in that booth long after the waitress cleared nearby tables. The coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My son, the boy who used to promise me the world with crayon drawings, had looked at me as if I'd betrayed him. Maybe I had, maybe truth. Too long buried. Always cuts before it heals. The phone rang just after 6 p.m. that evening. Marcus's voice was low, deliberate. "I met with him," he said. I closed my eyes, imagining them face to face, two men bound by blood and silence. And he's angry, says he feels lied to, but there's no denying it. Darla, he's mine. He looks exactly like I did at his age. Relief and sorrow collided in my chest. "What happens now?" I asked. "He wants to meet Victoria and the kids. He wants to know the family." There was a pause, softer this time. "You were right. I owe you an apology 29 years late. You deserved better than what I gave you." I let his words sink in, strange and distant, like hearing thunder from miles away. "It's not about me anymore," I said. "It's about Brent and that baby he's bringing into the world." "I know," he replied quietly, "and I intend to make things right. You have my word." After I hung up, I sat by the window watching the city lights blink on one by one. Somewhere across town, my son was dining with the father he'd never known. It should have felt like closure, but all I felt was the hollow ache of a door closing between us. Days passed. Brent didn't call. I heard through Mrs. Henderson, who still collected gossip like rent money, that he'd been seen at the Wellington mansion, dining with the family that had once pretended he didn't exist. Then, 5 days later, my phone rang again. Elodie. Her voice was tight, trembling under the weight of something unsaid. "We need to talk," she said. "Can you come over tonight around 8 p.m.? Every instinct told me to refuse, to protect what little peace I had left, but something in her tone, a plea, a crack, made me say yes. Their apartment gleamed like a photograph from a home magazine, polished floors, silver-framed wedding photos, not a thing out of place. Elodie opened the door in a pale maternity dress that clung delicately over her stomach. For a heartbeat, I saw the same woman from the wedding, all poise and polish. Then I noticed her eyes. They were swollen, rimmed with red. "Come in," she said softly. "Brent isn't here. He's having dinner with his father." The words landed heavy. His father. Not me, not us. "All right," I said, stepping inside. She led me to the living room, where the city lights spilled through the glass wall behind her. We sat across from each other, the silence trembling between us until she finally spoke. "I owe you an apology." I looked at her, unsure what to say. She took a deep breath, hands folded over her stomach as if she were steadying the life inside her. At the wedding. What I said. What I did, it was cruel. "I didn't know who you were." Her voice cracked. "But that's not an excuse. I knew you were Brent's mother, and that should have been enough." I said quietly, "You knew exactly who I was. Elodie. You just didn't think I mattered." She flinched, tears gathering again. "I know. My mother's influence, she's always taught me to measure people by what they wear, what they have." I let her voice become mine. But now everything's changed. She placed a trembling hand on her belly. "Brent's a Wellington. That baby I'm carrying is a Wellington heir, and you're his grandmother, the mother of one of the most powerful men in this city." There it was, the unspoken truth glittering like glass. Her apology wasn't just guilt. It was fear. I stared at her for a long moment. I didn't reveal the truth to destroy anyone. Elodie. I did it because my son deserves to know where he came from. He deserved more than shame and silence. She nodded quickly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I understand, but now Brent barely speaks to me. He's angry at me, at himself. He's staying at his father's house, and I think he's ashamed of how we treated you." That admission caught me off guard. My son, angry on my behalf. For the first time since the wedding, the thought didn't ache, it warmed. "What do you want from me?" "Elodie?" I asked gently. She swallowed hard. "I want to fix this. I want my husband back. And I want your forgiveness." Her eyes searched mine desperately. "Please, help me make things right." I leaned back, studying the woman who had once laughed at me in front of 200 strangers. "How?" "There's a Wellington charity gala next weekend. Marcus invited Brent, and Brent wants you to come too as his mother, as family." She hesitated. "I want to apologize there, publicly, so everyone knows how wrong I was." A public apology. I imagined her voice echoing through chandeliers and champagne flutes, the same people who'd laughed at me now clapping politely. Why I asked again, quieter this time. "Why do you really want to do this?" She looked down at her belly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I'm going to be a mother, and I don't want my child to grow up learning the same cruelty I did. I want him to know love, humility, and decency. I want to be better than my mother was." For the first time, I believed her. The edges of her voice were raw, stripped of performance. I reached out and touched her hand, cool and trembling. "Then start with honesty. No grand gestures, no speeches. If you want to make things right, do it quietly through actions, not applause." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I will, I promise." I stood to leave, and she followed me to the door. Before I stepped out, I turned to her. "Elodie," I said gently, "you may call yourself a Wellington now, but remember this: no name, no title, no money can make you worthy. Only your heart can." She swallowed hard, her lips trembling into a small, grateful smile. "I understand," she whispered, "and for what it's worth, I think your heart is the strongest thing I've ever seen." When I stepped back into the night, the air was cool and full of faint city sounds. Somewhere above me, the moon glowed behind thin clouds, quiet and watchful. I breathed deeply for the first time in days. Forgiveness wasn't simple, but maybe, just maybe, it was possible. 6 months later, the nursery smelled like powder and new beginnings. Pale sunlight spilled through white curtains onto a rocking chair where I sat, holding my grandson, tiny, perfect, and named Marcus James Cooper Wellington. His eyes were the same soft green that had once haunted me, but now, looking into them, I felt peace instead of pain. He stirred in my arms, made a small sound, then settled against my chest as if he already knew he was safe. Downstairs, laughter floated through the house. Brent's house, or rather, the home Marcus had given them as a wedding gift, a sprawling place with wide windows and a garden where Elodie said she'd plant roses. The same family who once pretended I was invisible now gathered here every Sunday for dinner. Marcus and Victoria came early, bringing apple pie and stories from their younger children. Brent's half-siblings, Catherine and Marcus Jr., chased each other through the halls while Elodie set the table and hummed quietly to herself. It was strange how life had turned, strange and beautiful. Brent walked in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of tea, that old furrow between his brows gone now. "He's out cold already," he whispered with a grin. I smiled, brushing a finger across the baby's cheek. "Just like you at that age. The moment someone held you, you gave in." He sat beside me, looking at his son, then at me. "You know," he said softly, "it took me a long time to forgive you." "I know," I replied. "You had every right to be angry, but I get it now." He continued, You weren't hiding the truth to hurt me. You were protecting me from it. His hand brushed mine. You spent your whole life trying to shield me from pain. I just wish I'd seen that sooner. The words caught in my chest like sunlight in glass. You were worth every sacrifice, I whispered. Every long night, every empty wallet, every tear, all of it. He smiled, and in that moment, I saw both the boy who waited for me at the window and the man he had become. When Marcus arrived, he walked straight over to the baby, his expression soft and reverent. "He looks just like you did when you were born," he told Brent, then turned to me. "You did this. Darla. You raised an extraordinary man." I wanted to tell him that I hadn't done it alone, that fate, luck. Stubborn love had all played their parts, but instead, I just nodded. For the first time, the past between us felt small, like a shadow fading at dusk. Even Victoria, once the distant wife whose name I could barely say, had found grace. She'd taken my hand during one of our first meetings, tears in her eyes. "I can't imagine how lonely you must have been," she said. "You gave him something money never could, unconditional love." I'd simply replied, "We both did what we could with what we had." That was enough. And Elodie, she had changed the most. Gone was the woman who measured worth in fabric and jewelry. She was softer now, grounded. She called me nearly every day, stopped by with groceries or simply to sit and talk. She'd built her apology piece by piece, not through grand speeches, but through presence, real, human, humble presence. One afternoon, months before the baby came, she and Brent arrived with an envelope. Inside was the deed to the Victorian house on Maple Street, the one I used to drive past with Brent, saying it was my dream home. "We want you to have it," Elodie said firmly when I started to protest. "You gave everything to this family. Let us give something back." Now, that same house was filled with the sound of laughter and the smell of dinners shared. Every Sunday evening, family gathered Marcus carving the roast, Victoria pouring wine, Elodie bouncing the baby while Brent told stories that made the room ripple with joy. Sometimes I would step back, watching the scene unfold, unable to believe that it all began with one night of humiliation. The night my pain became the key that unlocked truth. The night that turned shame into legacy. As the baby stirred again, I rocked him gently and whispered, "You'll never wonder who you are, little one. You'll grow up knowing the whole story, the hard parts, Massa, too. Because strength doesn't come from what we hide. It comes from what we face." Elodie appeared in the doorway then, smiling softly. "He always stops crying the moment you pick him up," she said. "He knows love when he feels it," I replied. She hesitated, then spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. "That night at the wedding, calling you hired help, it's the thing I'm most ashamed of in my life. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because of who you always were. You're the strongest woman I've ever known." I met her eyes, and for the first time, I truly believed her. "We all make mistakes," I said quietly. "What matters is what we do next." Downstairs, Brent called up. "Dinner's ready." The house filled with voices familiar, loving, whole. As I carried little Marcus down the stairs, I realized that every trial, every secret, every tear had led us here to laughter, forgiveness, and the kind of family that isn't built by blood alone, but by courage, grace, and truth. Sometimes life gives you its greatest gifts wrapped in pain. Sometimes humiliation is just the beginning of transformation. And sometimes the people who once broke your heart end up helping you rebuild it stronger than ever. If this story touched you, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how love and truth can change everything. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? I'd love to hear your thoughts.